When one team or player comes to dominate in any given sport, there inevitably comes a time where they transform from an exciting prospect to a downright villain in the eyes of opposing fans. Through most of the 2010s, it was undoubtedly the New England Patriots, but halfway into the 2020s, a new AFC powerhouse, forever shrouded in controversy, emerged. The Kansas City Chiefs are the NFL's public enemy number one, and no single player has been at the heart of their success more than quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Whether or not claims of favorable refereeing, poor sportsmanship, and outright cheating are justified, today we'll be taking a deep dive into why the NFL hates Pat Mahomes. Truthfully, this hasn't always been the case. Back in 2019, Mahomes had just earned an MVP in his first season as the starter in KC. He led the Chiefs to their first conference championship in a quarter century, where they would face off against the Brady-Belichick Patriots. The Pats of this era were equivalent to the Chiefs of today, with the entire country uniting behind Mahomes and company. Despite a 3-touchdown, 295 passing yard night from the first-year starter, the inevitable Pats came out on top in Arrowhead. As usual, New England was on the ref's good side, with a horrible roughing the passer penalty moving them downfield on a decisive fourth-quarter drive. Sound familiar? Of course, the Pats were a talented team, good in the clutch, well-coached, etc., etc. But there's no way around the bad calls always seeming to work for their benefit. Little did anyone watching know that this game would signal the passing of the torch from one contentious dynasty to another. When the Chiefs finally won the title in 2019, there was certainly a sense of relief around the franchise. Their decision to draft Mahomes in 2017 was fully vindicated, while Andy Reid finally had his ring, although the Chiefs O-line held Nick Bosa the entire game. Regardless, the NFL had a star on their hands. Mahomes was the golden boy who would usher in a new era and a winning legacy for the Chiefs organization. They seemed to be on the precipice of building a dynasty before falling to Brady in embarrassing fashion one final time in Super Bowl 55, then losing to the Bengals in the AFC Championship the following year. Mahomes roared back to form in 2022, winning a second MVP in a career-best season. But on the way to another Super Bowl triumph, Mahomes and the Chiefs' glory was mired by questionable refereeing. It started in a bizarre sequence during the AFC Championship game against the Bengals. KC failed to convert on 3rd and 9, leading the special teams units to come out on the field for nearly a minute until the officials decided that the Chiefs would get to replay 3rd down. They had supposedly blown the play dead, although they gave no clear notice to players and coaches, as both offense and defense played the entire down as usual. On the replay of 3rd down, Cincy sacked Mahomes, which was undone by a holding penalty on Eli Apple, allowing KC to move the chains. They then benefited from an incredibly soft holding penalty on a 3rd and long in the Super Bowl against the Eagles' James Bradberry, inside the last 2 minutes of a tied game. Suffice to say, conspiracy theories were starting to mount. The Chiefs had won another Super Bowl, as undoubtedly one of the best teams in the NFL. They certainly had the goods to win silverware, and each player was delivering when called upon, but the manner in which every call seemed to go their way in decisive moments, paired with the media narrative that Mahomes had comfortably cemented his place in the GOAT debate already, made fans across the league reconsider the poor standards of officiating. While controversy died down in 2023 thanks to a dip in the team's performance during the regular season, Kansas City tried to flip the script and complain that the refs were against them. We'll get to that in a second. They won a second Super Bowl over the 49ers at the end of the 2023 season, although, once again, there was a notable absence of holding calls, which was lamented during the game by San Francisco's head coach Kyle Shanahan.
Hey, I saw the hold, but that's what they do every time. They hold, they tug our guys when Pat leaves, then they let him go. That's what our guy did. Make sure they call it both ways.
A 9-0 start to 2024, in which the Chiefs' offense sputtered, reignited conspiracies about collusion between Kansas City and the referees. In their season opener against Baltimore, defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo unilaterally called a timeout, something that assistant coaches are not authorized to do. A debatable pass interference call in Week 2 against the Bengals helped them move into field goal range, and there was an egregious no call in the end zone the following week on a potentially game-deciding 3rd down pass play in Atlanta. Things didn't improve after the bye week, with the Super Bowl rematch against the 49ers generating a new wave of drama. Trent Williams was thrown out of the game for reacting to being struck in the face, while the Chiefs O-line got away with various holding and false start no calls. The hate for these refereeing mistakes fell largely on the shoulders of Mahomes, as it seems to be a blatant attempt by the league to protect one of their most valuable and marketable assets. If Mahomes wins, the league wins, drawing more attention to their product, whether it's for good or bad reasons. All of this reached a boiling point in the Chiefs' divisional round matchup against the Houston Texans at Arrowhead. For starters, Brian Cook wasn't penalized for executing a hip drop tackle on Dalton Schultz during the Texans' first possession. However, it would be on the ensuing drive that Mahomes drew the ire of fans across the league. Backed up at their own 33 on 3rd and 8, Mahomes throws an incomplete pass intended for Travis Kelce in what seemed like a potentially momentum-shifting play. To get the ball back from KC without letting them get any points on the board, the flag was thrown for roughing the passer. Will Anderson Jr. had broken free in the pocket and landed what appeared to be a perfectly legal hit. Even ESPN's rules analyst Russell Yerk admitted on air that the call was puzzling.
I didn't see anything there that supported a foul.
Instead of punting, the Chiefs got a new set of downs, ending the drive with a field goal. The next sticking point came on Mahomes' first drive of the second half. Looking to respond to a 10.5-minute scoring drive from Houston, Kansas City were desperate for a bit of momentum, with the score now just 13-12 in their favor. After moving the sticks to their own 35, Mahomes attempts to scramble after fumbling the first down snap. He manages to move to about the 40-yard line before the Texans defenders begin to converge around him, and he makes a criminally late decision to slide, once both Foley Fatukazi and Henry To'oTo'o's cleats had already left the turf. Houston's defenders collide on the attempted hit while Mahomes is unscathed, but immediately sees a flag fly out from the official's waistband. Unnecessary roughness this time. A call so absurd that Troy Aikman and the ESPN rules analyst couldn't help but voice their frustration.
Personal foul, unnecessary roughness, defense number 39.
Oh, come on. Yeah, I mean, he's a runner, and I could not disagree with that one more.
And Troy, I agree with you. There's no forcible contact to the head neck area of him. That should not have been a foul.
While it was reassuring to hear from credible sources that the refereeing of this game was subpar, it unfortunately did little to change the outcome for the Texans, who lost 23-14. The game left a bitter taste in the mouth of any non-Chiefs fans watching, not only for the blatant favoritism shown towards Mahomes, but also the questionable sportsmanship on display that frigid Saturday afternoon. Later on in the same drive where he drew the unnecessary roughness penalty, Mahomes was flushed out of the pocket. As he was running out of bounds, he slowed down right before he reached the sideline, obviously trying to bait Texan defenders into a late hit. He was shoved out of bounds by To'oTo'o, throwing his arms up in the air for a truly cringeworthy flop attempt, which once again drew further criticism from everyone watching, including the commentary team.
You know, he's trying to draw the penalty. You see that rather than just run out of bounds, he slows down.
Such blatant flopping is nothing new for Mahomes, as he seems well aware of the privilege he has as one of the league's stars. It's not uncommon to see him flailing his arms, milking contact anytime, anywhere. Not to say that he's never been hit illegally, but his tendency to exaggerate any touch from the opponent blurs the line for spectators, and more importantly, referees. How can we ever accurately discern when there has been unsanctioned contact from a defender when his flailing is routinely causing a distraction in real time? Not only is this frustrating to watch, but it complicates any intention of protecting the quarterback. Baiting hits from late slides and flops, as Mahomes has done frequently in recent seasons, is a flagrant abuse of rules such as roughing the passer, designed with the expressed intent of minimizing quarterback injuries. As a result, defenses are forced to play softer, and in the case of anyone tasked with facing a high-profile quarterback, be wary of even touching the guy. Rob Gronkowski recently said as much on the Up and Adams show.
And when they sack Patrick Mahomes, just touch him. Don't do anything more, you know? Don't throw him too hard down on the ground.
Whatever do you mean?
You might get a penalty.
There's certainly a case to be made that this is an issue teams come up against whenever they face the league's elite signal callers, with Josh Allen serving as a prime example. Chiefs fans will often point to the fact that the Bills' QB has just as many egregious flops, so Mahomes is getting a disproportionate amount of hate. After all, they're both just taking advantage of a broken system to varying degrees of success, so why does Pat take all the heat while Josh is America's QB? Well, because it isn't just about flopping. Of course, some will argue that nobody likes the Chiefs because they will always win by any means necessary, including flopping and getting lucky breaks from the refs. However, there was an episode between Allen and Mahomes in the 2023 season that turned many people off of the two-time league MVP. In a Week 14 matchup with the Bills, Mahomes threw the go-ahead touchdown pass with just over a minute remaining to play, appearing to seal the game. The play was called back for offensive offsides on cadarius Toney, a fairly explicit penalty. The Chiefs then turned the ball over on downs, sealing a 20-17 win for the Bills. When the two signal callers found each other after the game, Mahomes was caught on the hot mic complaining about the call.
Loudest call I've ever seen, man. Offensive offsides in that moment, man. Terrible.
He had managed to turn a symbolic show of sportsmanship into an awkward exchange with one of his most respected adversaries. The whole organization dragged the call in the media in the days that followed. But there's quite literally no way around the fact that Toney was lined up in the neutral zone. When the rules apply to Mahomes and company, it just seems like they can't hack it. It may be a rare call to get without a warning, but the sense of entitlement that it ought to be corrected or overlooked just for him made Mahomes even more unlikable. Pat tried to walk it back in the days after the game, but at that point, the damage had already been done. Now, I understand. All of this may sound very anecdotal, so let's take a look at the numbers to see if the Chiefs are actually favored by NFL refs. During the regular season, they ranked 7th in the league for opponents roughing the passer penalties and 31st for opposition unnecessary roughness calls. Meanwhile, they are 15th in terms of the number of penalties called on their opponents, which would suggest nothing out of the norm. It should be noted, though, that the vast majority of the examples cited from this season of poor refereeing are from calls that were either missed on the Chiefs or mistakenly attributed to opposing teams. When we look at how the penalty numbers change when we get to the postseason, it paints a pretty bleak picture. Since 2021, the Chiefs have never committed more penalties than an opponent in the playoffs, with nearly half of the total penalties called in that time span compared to every team they've faced combined. According to The Athletic, when it comes to roughing the passer penalties, the average for active QBs in the playoffs is .12 per game. Mahomes' career average of .412 per postseason game is the highest among all active QBs. As we've discussed, the penalties always arrive in the biggest moments, when the Chiefs need to be bailed out of a tough situation. Whether it's a no call or an inexplicable flag on the other team, Kansas City always has a path to victory. While it's easy to say that fans across the NFL dislike Mahomes solely because of favoritism from the refs, there are many other instances of poor sportsmanship, flopping, and various other off-field distractions that make it impossible to root for him if you're not a Chiefs fan. Just as it had been for the Patriots during the Brady era, the starting QB on the league's best team will always have a target on his back, particularly when they are in the midst of establishing their dynasty. Greatness is often divisive, and while his talent on the field will never be in doubt, Mahomes' pandering antics could prove a point of debate around his legacy later on down the line. It's not exactly in the NFL's interest to crack down and penalize flopping, as it would put the face of the league's well-being at risk. But there's no doubt that some kind of change must happen in order to restore any true sense of competitiveness or parity in the NFL. Sure, we've seen it all before. A star QB is untouchable and nobody can stand him, but given the increased scrutiny in the age of social media and the ease with which clips of botched calls or flops go viral, even if Patrick Mahomes ends his career as a greater football player than Tom Brady, he will quite possibly go down as the most hated by rival fans. But what do you think? After seeing all of the evidence, do you believe that the NFL's hate for Pat Mahomes is justified? Let us know in the comments.